All right. Thank you very much for joining us. The Novi Public Library's event this evening is Mental Health Check-In, and I appreciate you taking out the time to be with us as we discuss some interesting things that are going to hopefully help you along the way. Today is actually International Women's Day, and I have two women, two beautiful women with us, professionals. Dr. Crystal Jackson, we've had many occasions. She is a licensed certified psychologist, and she always assists with providing good techniques and strategies and advice and professionalism to help us along our mental capacity as much as we can handle in this day and time. And we also have another special guest, and it is Miss Heather Brown. She is a licensed professional counselor, and she's also a board certified art therapist. And thank you both for being with us. Heather, it looks like you're on mute, so I'm going to ask you to unmute so we can hear you from the very beginning. And thank you very much, Dr. Jackson, for being with us once again.
Hello, Gail. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me back again. It's always a wonderful time having such important, meaningful dialogue and conversation about mental health. So thank you for providing this platform and the opportunity to do so.
Absolutely. And thank you, Heather. Good evening.
I appreciate you so much for bringing me into this conversation, and I look forward to putting our minds and hearts together to support you guys tonight, and especially your mental health and your loved ones as well.
It certainly is needed during this time. And I ask you, we do have some questions that were presented to us beforehand, but if you do have a question on any subject related to mental health, if you are visiting us through Zoom, I ask that you type your questions or comments in the chat, and we can address it. And if you are watching us live on Facebook and you have some questions that you would like to present, please type those in the comment section and we will follow up on those as well. All right, let's get started, huh? I already have a few questions that were submitted, so we'll get started with the first one here, and it's about should a parent feel guilty if they need adult time? We spend a lot of time homeschooling and work. Parents don't get a lot of time to take a breath. And Dr. Jackson, let me start off with you with that question.
So I would first offer the person who submitted that question to look at it as not even a should. It's more of it's not beneficial,
Mm.
right? Sometimes we place these should statements in our lives, and it can make us feel as if we should or should not, right? We are obligated to or not to do something, when really it's not about obligation necessarily, but it's about what's beneficial. I hope that makes sense to the
Mhm.
person who submitted the question. It's beneficial to take time for yourself. Um, we know that we can only give of ourselves based on the energy, right, that we have available. So if we don't have the energy, think about sometimes after a long day of work, you can feel emotionally and physically exhausted and tired. And even if you're not working and you're not working in a paid position and you are
Mm.
working in a home setting
I'm so
where
glad you corrected that.
you are freely giving of your time and your energy after that type of day with homeschooling and just attending to the needs of the household and family, you can feel burned out at times. You can feel exhausted. And those are all very natural feelings, physically and emotionally. And it's okay to feel that way. It actually can be used as a sign, right? Like as we can say it's a yellow sign, or maybe sometimes I feel like it's a red sign. Sometimes you can stay up so late that your body automatically starts to just kind of drift off, right? And
Mhm.
so when we're taking care of family and we're attending to the needs of our family, children, with schooling or anything else, our bodies are giving us a sign oftentimes that we need to take a break, and we need to make sure that we are listening to our body and our emotions when those signs come up. And so sometimes the signs can be feeling not just tired, but it can be irritability, right? We notice that we're much more irritable than we are otherwise. and we recognize that something that would not normally irritate us or bother us, we seem to be much more quick to respond, and maybe respond in a very, irritated manner, where we're easily frustrated. And so those are all signs that yes, it is beneficial for you to, your body's requesting it, your body's requiring it. It's just like when we feel like we need something to drink, we need water, our body can crave certain things, and our body craves that time for self-care. And self-care can look different, right? Not all self-care looks the same. Sometimes self-care is, sometimes people say they want to go out and do something. Um, Sometimes self-care, even without it being in the midst of a pandemic, sometimes self-care is just, I'm just at home and I do nothing.
Mm.
Doing nothing is really doing something, right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Heather, what do you think about that?
Oh, I completely agree. And um, for me, it's helpful to remember to think of myself, or think of the idea of like charging my phone or charging a battery or even filling up my car with gas. If I'm running low on my energy, my vitality to do what I need to do for myself, my job, my family, my kids, that means I need to charge. I need to replenish in some kind of way. And if having some time without children or to myself or with another adult feeds me or nurtures me in that way, fills up my tank a bit, charges my battery, then it is only in my interest, and really in my kids too, to take that time and make that time so that I can be more energized and able to show up and do what I want and need to do for my family.
I'm going to extend on that question. They didn't ask it, but I'm not sure the age of the children. What should you say to the children when you need that break? Do you explain to them that you need a break, or do you just hire a babysitter? What do you do?
I think, Heather, would you agree? I think it's perfectly healthy, appropriate. It's a teaching moment. Also, it can be that children understand that even though you are their parent, that you too, just like they may need time, right, to kind of regroup and gather themselves and replenish their energy level. The same is true for parents, right? So parents, I think, can model proper and really healthy self-care by having that open dialogue and conversation, so that it becomes a part of what the children understand to be normal, right? And that it's not that the parent is upset with the children, it's not that they've done anything wrong, it's just, this is what mom needs, or this is what dad needs, and this is going to help me feel better, right? And so to have that open dialogue, I think, can be helpful, and it's also a moment of the children learning what it looks like, to take care of yourself, just like brushing teeth or eating vegetables, drinking water, all those other things about being healthy, that we like to teach our children. I think this can be added to that list.
And it's something that seems like three of the questions kind of tie in together. This one says, I'm having trouble balancing work life, family life, extended family. Any advice? Heather, want to try that one?
Yeah, absolutely. For all the pressures we have and all the expectations from others and all the changes we've been through, it will be normal to become overwhelmed easily. And it's important to reframe where we're at and expect less of ourselves. Or another way might be to say, I'm okay if I'm not able to do everything for everyone, because that's not really realistic anyways, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think of it like a balancing act. I want to be there for my family, and it's a lot: work, young kids, extended family. But if I'm not putting on my oxygen mask or taking the time I need, then I won't be able to give to them, and I will get burnt out quicker. So it's important to do what we can to pace, even on a daily basis, For some of us, just even getting that 10-15 minutes to ourselves before the kids wake up or the end of the day when we shut off our phones, no more calls, no more FaceTimes, to just be with myself, be with my thoughts, my book, my show, whatever it is that helps me, is really important so that we can keep starting every day fresh. It's a tough balancing act, and no one can get it perfect. There is no perfect. There is no right for everything right now. It's doing the best we can.
One thing you said, and I certainly agree, is when you said I can't do everything for everyone, or I can't be, I think even if you put that reminder in your phone to remind yourself that every few hours, just because you hear that and you know that that's the case, you can't do everything for everyone, but then you find yourself doing everything for everyone because you don't know how to say no. But so whatever little reminder you post it on your refrigerator, I think that's where I frequent the most since I've been home. If I post it on my refrigerator or something just to remind yourself of that, I think it's helpful. Dr. Jackson, did you have a comment?
Well, you know what? I think when you mentioned, Gail, like a reminder, right? Some type of a cue almost, right? To remind yourself. One thing that I offer to people in regards to this area, and maybe helping them to create healthy boundaries between themselves and other people, is just because I can doesn't mean I should. Right? We can do a lot of things. We can really push ourselves to the extreme, and our body may hang in there for a while, but it doesn't mean that we should always attempt to push ourselves to that limit, right? It goes back to not being beneficial, and noticing the red flags, right? The sense that I'm becoming irritable with maybe other individuals because I feel like I'm always doing something for them. And when that feeling comes up, it's really not, most times it's not really about the other person asking, it's about
I lost your audio. Is it just me? Can you hear her, Heather?
I cannot.
We can't hear you, Dr. Jackson. I'm not sure you're. Why? Looks like you froze. I can't hear you.
did I pick back up?
There
I hear
are.
you now. You're frozen, but I hear you.
Great.
Come on, let's work it. We got it.
Sometimes the red flag of irritability comes up, and it can come out towards other people. So we become irritated with others versus recognizing that that's really a sign that I'm probably not holding healthy boundaries in a way in which would be beneficial for me, right? So if we find ourselves always kind of saying either out loud or in our head that I'm always doing, I'm always giving, you all are asking me to do so much and I have to go here and I have to do that. If you're complaining to the people who you are helping, right, or complaining to someone else about helping others, it's probably a sign that you're pushing yourself too much. And that you probably are better able to attend to your healthy boundaries and your self-care by kind of pumping the brakes, backing up, and not doing as much. It is healthy to say no sometimes. And if we have these feelings that come up with us where we feel like, oh, if I don't do it, right? That's a famous line. If I don't do it, then it won't get done, right? If we're feeling like everything falls on us, again, that's probably another sign that we need to attend to self-care and do a better job with making sure we're having healthy boundaries.
And you know what I found, and you're so right when you say saying no is a good option many times. I find once you stop playing with it in your head and just say no, or say I'm not available, or say I can't do that, you'll realize you'll feel much better than holding on to it for an extended period of time where it's really only affecting you and not even necessarily the other situation or the other person. Once you release that, it's a pressure, a weight that's off of you. And it's like, oh, I could have said no last month or yesterday or an hour ago, whatever. Don't hold on to excess baggage or excess stress when you it's probably an easy solution by just saying no sometimes. I'm going to move on to the next question. And this is a different subject. It says, I lost a family member and a few friends to COVID, and I'm still afraid of catching COVID myself. Is this a problem? Should I be concerned about my feelings? Either can address that. Afraid of catching the virus. They've had people close to them, family members who've had it.
First off, we are so very sorry for your losses. It is never, ever easy to lose someone we love, and more than one person within such a short span of time is incredibly difficult for any person. Um, and on top of this, a very real worry and fear of catching the virus yourself. It's a very personal and I would use the word deep. It's pretty straightforward, not complex, but it's a deep sense of worry and sadness together. And I think that it's very important to really follow along with what Dr. Jackson is speaking to, with not just taking one day at a time and pacing yourself, but remembering this is a time when you need you, and the people in your life that are there for you, that you feel connected to really welcome in that support and connections in any way that you feel comfortable and that they're able to offer you. It's really important to not navigate these fears and the sadness that you're feeling alone.
I would add to that as well. I would say, along with what Heather mentioned, I would add on communicating what your needs are, right? Communicating what your needs are can be so very helpful. Um, Sometimes people may say things like, "Oh, you're in my prayers, you're in my thoughts," right? But if you really need to speak to someone, or if you really need, you know, something tangible from an individual in that moment, you really, we don't know the person who asked the question, but if you really feel like, I just need a day off, or I need someone, if you can pick up the groceries for me this particular day, or yes, I thank you so much. Can I use help? Yes. If you can cook a meal, right? That would be so helpful. Sometimes we don't always take people up on their offer for help. Um, and I think I want to offer maybe something even to someone in the supportive role of maybe not having gone through a loss, but they have a friend or a loved one who's gone through a loss, like our person who submitted the call. For those who are in the supportive role, I would say offer, when you extend assistance, I would say be specific, right? Because when a person is dealing with grief and loss, they may not always know what they need. They may not always be able to have the words to articulate what their needs are. They can feel so overwhelmed that they're not even sure what to ask for, where to start, right? So, for those in the supportive role, I think it's helpful for us to understand that sometimes if we can just be specific and say, hey, instead of asking, just let me know if I can do anything, right? More of, hey, I'm going to bring you breakfast today, right? I'm going to bring over dinner this evening. Don't worry about cooking. I'm going to do it, right? And then that way, the person on the receiving end, if they would like that, now they can say, yes, thank you so much. That's so helpful. That's so thoughtful. I appreciate you so much. Or they can say, no, I'm okay tonight. It's so right. And I think that can be helpful, right? So I guess I look at it as we're kind of working together. So the person who posed a question, I still say try to express your needs as much as you can, but then having the understanding, for those of us in the supportive role, having the understanding that the person may not always be able to express exactly what they need. I think when we extend help, I think we should be specific, and I think that can go a long way.
Very good. For those of you who are just now tuning in, this is a mental health check-in. If you have any questions or concerns that you'd like to pose to Dr. Jackson or Ms. Heather Brown, please submit your questions in the chat or the comment section, depends on what platform you're on, and we will take your questions. I'm going to move some of these questions around because this one kind of ties into grief, as did the other one. How long is too long to grieve? My dad died over a year ago and it still feels like yesterday. Is this normal? Either of you would like
Heather,
to
I
take
felt like you were about to chime in. Was it going to be something about the last question, and maybe even it fits with this current
it? Yeah, I'm
question?
sorry. Mhm.
I don't want to jump in too soon.
Oh, sure. I can. I was going to answer you really clearly. There is no time limit. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling like you're feeling now, even though it's been a year. Grief knows no time frame for feeling the pain of losing our loved ones, especially someone you're so close to. It is really, there are, although there's no time limit or time frame that's right or correct or healthy for grief, there are some really straightforward ways that we can cope with the loss of someone we loved that do help the intensity and the frequency of how pained we feel decrease with time. And one of those has to do with doing what Dr. Jackson was speaking to, which is letting us feel our feelings, know that there's nothing wrong with feeling the sadness, the anger, the regret, any of the uncomfortable feelings that are perfectly normal to experience, and take the time to cry, to call your friend, do some art, do some writing, some letter writing, visiting, honoring, connecting with your loved one in ways that are familiar and welcome to you from your religious or spiritual tradition. It's really important to take the time to let us feel our feelings and not let them be wrong or bad. They're really normal, and the more we let ourselves feel them, the less overwhelming they tend to be.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
100%. We had a lifetime, right? You had a lifetime, or years, maybe a better phrase. You had years with this person, right, in your life. You had all this time, all these memories, all these um, moments with this person being in your world, and understanding that even though the loss has occurred, we being kind to ourselves after the experience of a loss is so important. Allowing your body and your mind time to really wrap your head around what happened, right? The feeling that you experience when you lose a person, how your world can feel like it has completely shifted and changed, and the reality of my life, it will no longer be the way that it was, because your life before the loss was with that person being a part of it. So now you are adjusting, right, to this new way of life, right? So whether you saw the person often or talked to the person, or, those things are no longer happening. And so you're giving yourself as much time as you need to learn this new way of life without this person. So Heather is absolutely right with there not being a time limit on this, and not attempting to hold yourself to a time limit or shaming yourself because you're still adjusting to this new way of, I like to say, each person, when you experience a loss, you're having to learn a new way, a very creative way of carrying the person with you who's no longer physically here,
Mhm.
right? So that's really what we're doing when we go through loss. and the person who submitted the question, that's what you're dealing with. You're learning this new way to carry, I think it was her father, a new
This
way,
person's father, yes.
a new way to carry the father with you. um and that takes time to
Yes.
get to the point of being able to do that. um and it's okay.
Mhm, mhm. I have another question. This one's not grief, looks more like it says, how does one deal with the mental weight that comes with pursuing success in all aspects of life, such as faith, marriage, work, exercise, and family? We get that? How does one deal with the mental
Heather,
weight
you're
of
smiling.
everything?
My Heather
Go.
smiling. My first thought was without the expectation of perfection. That's how you deal with it, without the expectation of perfection. Meaning that if there may be time where you, so there's a lot of things that were listed there, so there may be
Mhm,
times where you have this set time where you want to pray, or you have this set time where you want to go and exercise, and you have this set time that you want to have with your family, and all that's great, right? It's wonderful to have these, attempt to create these set times for different things. um at the same time, it's also okay that if you miss it, that there's still tomorrow, and you may be able to do it then. um because if we go through life, I think, with this checkbox approach, it can make us feel like we are failures if we're not always checking off every single thing on our list every single day,
mhm.
and
Yeah.
that can feel very self-defeating.
You said something that was good in there too. They put all of this together. That sounds like the weight in and of itself, just based on the question. They have faith, marriage, work, exercise, and family all bunched into one question of there's your weight. How about splitting some of that up a little bit, and then you can hit each one at a time instead of trying to compress it all into one goal. Maybe I know they were just trying to make the question short, but even if you can break some of this down. Heather, anything you'd like to respond on any one of those or all of it?
Sure. Thanks, Gail. I think that's a great idea to compress it down. Or I'm a big fan of what can two birds with one stone, right? How can I, where do two things I want overlap that I can kind of maximize my time or my effort towards
Oh,
something I want? Also, just looking maybe more closely on what it is you really, really want. Our our culture has puts a lot of pressure on us to do a lot, and if you're a high achieving person, you have big dreams, you feel like you have big shoes to fill, that pressure can mount up really quickly. And every adult will benefit from taking some time to really comb through and see what are my priorities. Maybe it's looking from a place of core values rather than like areas of life, to see, how can I get my most bang for my buck with what I put my energy into that will actually genuinely satisfy me, rather than feel like I'm checking off boxes, as Dr. Jackson mentioned, to fulfill these goals. But are they things that really matter to me? And if I spend all my time seeing if I've checked them or haven't checked them, I could miss some of the moments of living, which are really fun and really valuable, especially when we're dealing with so much stress and loss and anxiety in life, to be present with what's actually happening in between all the big dreams we're chasing.
right.
Mhm.
I feel like so often people, we as humans, we can be really hard on ourselves. And sometimes we talk about the expectations we have of others, but sometimes I feel like maybe our expectations of ourselves, could use some realignment or like adjustment. Because being overly self-critical, and I know that's an ambiguous phrase, right? Overly, because my overly could be different from somebody else's overly. but but the point is that sometimes we can have such high expectations, and sometimes honestly we can listen to people, right? So we listen to people, we go to church, right? So the person mentioned faith. We can go to church and we can hear people speak and communicate their experiences, but I think that we must understand that the person who's communicating their experiences and maybe even their success, they is it right to say 9 times out of 10 that you're probably not getting the full story, right? You're getting a condensed version of how they arrived at whatever place they arrived at, and maybe sometimes we're comparing ourselves to other people. Oh, this person does this all the time, and this person goes to the gym is this often, and this person prays for an hour every day. This person does this all the time, and I think some of that I think we have to remind ourselves that we don't know the story. We don't know what's going on in the other person's lives. If I'm just kind of throwing that out there, of course I don't know if the person who submitted that question is doing that, but my point is just that sometimes we can hear things from other people. We can be a witness or an observer of other people in their lives, and sometimes we can compare ourselves in an unhealthy way, and that can become hurtful to ourselves.
Yeah, I'm looking all around because I got a question coming from one place or another, but here's another one that's, what do you do when you have a loving family, but I still feel alone or lonely? That's what the person said.
What a wonderful question. I think they're on a good track by just asking yourself that question and noticing that there is a feeling of loneliness while you're also noticing you have a family that's loving towards you. There could be a number of different things going on for your life, and it's hard to say or sort through unless you take the time to talk to someone, talk it through, look a little closer, be your own internal investigator here to notice when those feelings of loneliness are they kind of spiking at certain times or days or situations, or is it more of a steady kind of feeling of loneliness and low mood? I think it's important to notice those differences, and also to ask yourself, what is it that I wish were different? And use maybe your imagination or look through what's around you with people in your life that don't seem to feel that way, and say, like, what is out there that, I have this loving family, which is so incredible, but what is it that I don't have, that part of me is missing or nagging at me about? And it might surprise you or it might not surprise you, but it's a good question, good space to give yourself time and gentle care to look at that without being judgmental or harsh. A lot of people have that feeling that may come and go for a number of reasons over time.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
That was great. That was so good.
That was good. We covered that one,
That was
didn't
just so great, because I love the idea of asking the question. I love that idea of asking yourself the question of, it reminds me of the miracle question, right? So it's like, if I could have it my way, what would my way look like? Like, how would things be different? How would things be different? It just reminds me of that type of questioning. And I think people would just be possibly, I agree, Heather, maybe surprised with what they come up with, and maybe what they never realized, right, was really there up underneath some of this stuff, and what may come out if they were to ask that question. Yeah, that was great.
Another great piggyback question to ask yourself if you're stuck is, when have I felt like this before in my earlier days? right? It might be a little clue, because sometimes when we go into funks or something shifts for us and it doesn't quite make sense, it can actually have to do with something that maybe from the past that we didn't realize is coming back up to our minds, and we're feeling it, but we're not aware of it. And yeah,
Mhm.
questions are a great way to
Oh,
get to know
great.
ourselves in that way. Absolutely.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, great.
Here's another question. This one says, my son is in his first year of college. He seems to have depression because of COVID, and he took all classes online and still lives at home. He just spent a lot of time playing computer games, don't they all, every day. Does not have too much time and motivation for his school studies. What can I do to help him?
Hmm.
A lot of people, I'm sure, have that question. Young people now, you're school online, video games online, and entertaining yourself online.
Well, this is a college student, right? This
Mhm.
is a college student, and this is a parent asking the question regarding the son and saying this is what she has noticed,
Yes.
right? This is what she's noticed. Um, and she mentioned how much time is being spent, not online for classes necessarily, but gaming,
And
right?
I
Just
imagine it's a combination of both. Also mentioned depression, doesn't have motivation for school study.
doesn't have motivation for school study. I wonder if the person who submitted that, um, if these are pure observations or if there has been dialogue with the child. And I know I'm saying child, the person could be 40 and they're still going to be the parent's child, but
That's right.
an adult child. I wonder if there has been conversation. So I would start there. If there hasn't been conversation, I would start with a very open conversation. And, without knowing, more than what was presented in the question, I would also at least like to toss out the idea of possibly seeing if your college age child takes well to the idea of spending more time together.
And this person did say it's pure observation. So,
It's pure observation.
mhm.
So, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. I would say start with the conversation. Try to see what's going on in your son's world, right? Beyond observation. See what he has to say, see what thoughts may come up, feelings that may come up. Sometimes, when our children are getting older, we may feel like, oh, they're too old for, right? And we start to fill in the blanks for what our children are too old for. But I will tell you that to be able to make yourself available to your child to speak to, and letting your child know that you're open to receive what they have to say and how they're feeling and what their thoughts are, even if you can't solve it for them in that moment, but just being a sounding board can be so incredibly powerful and helpful to your son. And exploring, I don't know if I got this out, but exploring whether or not your son would be open to more time together, right? So away from the TV, and hey, let's just have dinner together, right? Like, let's just have a moment where we're doing something together away from electronic use.
Yeah, I would add to that, it is a really tough time for adolescents and college age. I mean, man, first year of getting to go to college is such a huge life event, and nothing's nothing's anything that we would have wanted it to be for him. And I know you know, as the parent, you empathize with that greatly. And like Dr. Jackson is saying, it's really helpful just to be listening without making it your problem to solve, but really inviting, dialogue, or even some observations of what it is they might be really missing that would lift their spirits. you know your kid best, and you probably have a pretty good idea of the people or activities that they would be enjoying if they could be on campus or leaving the house more, without COVID. And it's actually really good to talk about the things that we wish were different and what we're looking forward to be different, and finding ways to connect and dream, and also in a way grieve what he didn't get to have that we wish he had had. And those are really, and do what we can, if there's a dialogue started, sometimes that can just relieve some of the stress and the low mood. Getting up and changing your routine is really helpful for depressive symptoms, for sure. Not doing the same thing every day, even though that's exactly what we feel like doing when we're depressed. As little as possible, variety, and see if you can play to his strengths and his interests to get some more movement or some more connection around it. Could be really helpful just to understand more where he's at, and also to help perhaps him find ways to lift his own mood.
And sometimes I wonder too, as a parent, do we know the difference when we say depressed versus bored? If we're only diagnosing through observation, is it depression can be really serious. Boredom can maybe take on some similar roles visually, but how do you determine the difference, or should you, or what do you say to that?
I look for impairment.
Hmm.
That's what I look for. When I say impairment, I mean if there are, impairment in physical sense. So if there are, significant changes in appetite. So am I seeing that the person's not really eating as much, right? And there's the appetite has been suppressed because of the shift in mood, or because of the depression, has appetite increased? Um, and again, when you're looking at depression, it's not just one, right, symptom. It's multiple. And so am I seeing changes in their sleeping patterns as well? Um, am I noticing that they're not sleeping as much? They're having difficulty, they're complaining about having difficulty, or they're sleeping all the time. In this case, I don't know. With the gaming, it sounds like maybe they're just being up a lot with the gaming. But again, we don't know if that means they're gaming in the middle of the night and they can't sleep. So there's so many questions there. But looking at physical changes, looking at changes in academic performance. So even though this is his first year and this is the year that he started, is this year and his academic performance very different from how he performed maybe 2 years ago in high school? Right. And so that can give somewhat of an indication, even though, of course, there is a difference in the intensity of workload from college to high school. It can still give you an indication, right? So if a person is thriving in high school, they're probably not going to, show up with a 1 point, right, something in college, even though there is a difference in the intensity and the rigor of college work compared to high school work. Um, so I would look at those things. I would look at mood changes. So motivation, yes, is one. Are there other changes? And I think that some changes you may not know until you have that dialogue, right? So motivation being one, but is there like increased fatigue? um, is there issues with not wanting to interact with other people? So even though people may not be 100% comfortable yet going out and having social um, interaction with other people, or a lot of that, is the person still willing to make phone calls to friends and text messages, video chat with people? Is he still engaging at all? Is he engaging with you, mom, at home? Or father? I'm not sure if it was a mom or dad who submitted the question, but is there engagement at home at all? Right? Is there isolation? Is it like I'm in my room and I'm gaming and I'm door is closed and it's just I'm in my own world and I hardly ever come out to interact at all with anyone else in the home? So there are things like that, that I would be concerned about. Does he feel connected to others? Right. So socially, right, it goes back to, is he interacting with friends at all? What does that look like? Is there a desire to go out and do it, even though there may be some restrictions right now because of the pandemic, but is there a desire to do that, or has there been a loss of desire or interest to do things? Right. So just because we're in the pandemic doesn't mean that we lose interest. Like, I feel like we're all like, some of us are on pins and needles waiting for this to all be over, and we're like, as soon as it's over, right, I'm busting out and I'm doing everything on my list, right? And so I would look at that too, his interest. And do you notice the depression at certain times of the day? Is it for the majority of the day, most days in a week? Do you notice it only at certain times in certain situations? So there's so much that goes into diagnosing clinical depression, but those are just some of them to look for.
And for the person who posed that question, if you'd like to type something else in the chat, I know those were a lot of questions, but if you want to give a little bit more detail, please continue to direct message me. I think he is depressed in the morning. Okay. They could be typing a little bit more, but that's what they said so far. So
Noticing it more in the morning, I would say I would say go back to the dialogue with the son. I would say make sure we're making it more than observation. I think observation is great. It's a great start, right? Being attentive, being aware of the changes that we're noticing in our children. I think the next step would be having that conversation and dialogue with our children, to check in and actually see how they're doing.
this person also said does not want to talk to anyone in the family. Okay. Did he before? This is me asking. I'm sorry. I had 3 to 4 years myself, and I am a mom. 3 to 4 years. I'm thinking they were saying of depression. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think bringing in supports, people outside of the family, letting them know you're concerned and seeing if they'd be willing to reach out can be helpful. A relative, a coach, a neighbor, a teacher, from high school, maybe that they were close to, finding a way to connect in that way. Also, I've found it's not universal, but with young people today, they're much more mental health savvy than us adults are. And the parent might be surprised if they just say, hey, I've been depressed. I know what it's like. And I'm noticing, XYZ with you. And I'm wondering if that's something that you're finding yourself struggling with. And if you'd like some help, because I'm here to support you in getting the help you need, even if it's not opening up to me. I support you getting, if this is what you're struggling with, we can figure this out. Let's look at next steps. I think that's a really important direct conversation to have.
Mhm.
Very good. That's good. All right. I don't have any more questions, and I don't think let me check here again. Nope, I don't have any more questions right now. But let's continue to talk about. Well, we said we're going to talk about grief and loss, and I think we touched on that some as well. Do you see any more questions?
So I do. I see a
Where is it?
question
Yeah.
here. I'm
Oh,
not sure.
there's one. Something just popped up there.
It says, what do you suggest to families with one school age child versus more than one child to help that child to minimize stress that child may be experiencing due to virtual schooling, since they don't have the social interactions they would have in a school setting? What do you suggest? Oh, okay. So what do you suggest to families where there's only one child in the home?
Is that what it's okay?
Yes, that's the question. How do you help that? What would you suggest to help that child to minimize stress that child may be experiencing? So what would you suggest to the parents in that family? So if there is a family unit, there's only one child in the home, they're homeschooling, so they don't have siblings to interact with.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going physically into a school building, And so they don't have the friendship circles that they used to have on a daily basis. They don't have those peers to socialize and interact with. What do you suggest to the family in that setting? How
What's
do
the
you,
age range of the child? Do they name the age of the child?
it just said school age child.
School.
So anywhere from, 17 under, I would assume.
Mhm.
17 and under. And um, what would you suggest? What would you suggest to that family? Yeah, that's the question. What do you suggest to the family who has just one child in the home and the child in the home doesn't have any other social interactions with a sibling or their peer group?
All right.
Yeah.
Heather, you got that?
Okay. Um, there's three ideas that come to mind right off the bat. One is if you're comfortable or able to quote pod with another family that does have one or more children, a neighbor that you feel safe enough with, that could be really helpful and go a long way for your child at this time. If that is not an option, then looking at there are a lot of very creative ways that programs are engaging kids virtually in group formats, whether it's a chess club or a dance class or a poetry slam. Honestly, I'm floored by the amount of creative ways beyond online gaming that are being offered to kids. I know my kids have gotten a lot out of it, to my pleasant surprise, because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, they're used to doing things in person. What are they going to get out of, attending a Zoom like we are? But they do, and they enjoy it, and they, with different interests and whatnot. But I think it's important to find that an in-person outlet and or a virtual group outlet beyond school that's fun and playful and related to what your child is interested in. And then the third idea is, and I know this, for some parents, they love this, and for some parents, they roll their eyes at me when I suggest this, but go ahead and, save some time each day to be a kid with them and go play. Don't teach them anything. Don't tell them what to do or not to do. Just go play with them, shoot hoops, color, whatever it is, be silly, so that they can get some of that human to human relaxed playtime that they would be getting so much more of if they were in an in-person learning environment.
Sure. I can speak on that a little bit too, having an only child, and I homeschooled as well, and trying to keep, and this was, before COVID, but keeping your child exciting, making the home fun is what it's all about. And I think that's at any age. I'm thinking smaller children is what they're talking about, but I'm not certain. But just as you mentioned, Heather, just doing fun things at home really make all the difference. You use your creativity, go buy a box cake and make cake together and decorate it with icing. Go play some games, go watch something on TV with the child, have them pick out, what do you want to watch tonight, hon? Lighten up. If you lighten up and make the home peaceful, I think you'll have a peaceful body, to deal with. And pretty much that's what it's all about. Kids want fun and someone who can understand them and someone they can enjoy. And the younger they are, it doesn't even necessarily make a difference whether it's another kid around or not. You be the kid for them. You embrace them. You say, oh, tell them you love them. Tell them you care. Make it really light, even if they mess up on assignments, because I know the overwhelmingness of dealing with doing school online is a lot for a young child all the way through college. So don't put the pressure and the load on them. They already have that. Be that, be that something that they can lean on. So if they're not doing well, don't beat them up. That's not helping the matter. Say more so I think understanding and even help out a little. You see 1 + 1, it's two. Tell them it's two. Don't do their homework, but just feel, let them feel that they have your support. And I found that a supportive parent makes all the difference in an unhappy child. That's
Oh,
mine.
I have an add-in to that question. It says age between 14 and 16.
Oh, a little older, so.
Age between 14 and 16. I think the concepts are still the
The
same,
same.
right?
Hmm.
The concepts are the same. The actual, maybe using what Heather said, the actual online group may be different, right? That is
Hmm.
selected, but the concepts are the same. So still looking at social interaction groups that take place remotely, and also putting yourself as the parent in a position of being able to essentially get on their level, right? So even if it's a teenager, maybe you all have a hair salon day right there at
Hmm.
the house, right? Maybe you all have a spa day right there at the house. You do manicures and pedicures, on each other. If it's a girl, of course. If it's a boy, then you get the person outside maybe and do some things that way. Maybe you are inside and you're trying to figure out something to build, right? So it doesn't matter. Girls can build
Hmm.
too, girls can go outside too. So it doesn't matter the gender. My point is that you getting involved, I think, going back with what Heather was suggesting, is that even with an older age child, you getting involved as a parent, to have time and knowing and talking to them about what they would like to do given the situation, right, of the pandemic. So yes, we have ideals of what we would like to do if the pandemic was not here, but since it is here, what can we come up with that would be fun and creative,
Hmm.
between the two of us, or right, or between the three of us if it's both parents in the home and the child. But I think that's so important. And even still, you have the ability, Heather, I think you mention, I think I heard you say neighbors, but you may have neighbors. You may also have, the parent may have friends that have age, children of similar age to your child. And so if your friends and their children has never connected with your children, maybe trying to make that happen, to create scenarios, where your child is able to connect with other people their age and socialize, um, and have relief that way.
Hmm. For sure. There's
I-
Facebook. I'm sorry, Heather, go on.
Oh, just one other thought. If it works for you, and you've been considering it, this is a really good time to get a pet too. It
Ah.
having it's no substitute for a human friend, but it does. I've seen a lot of kids and teenagers. It really helped their mood and help them bridge some of that isolation when they have, a creature to care for that's looking for them and waiting for them to play or attend to every day. It can be really healthy and helpful, especially in this time of isolation.
How sweet. I've never heard a therapist recommend that. That's pretty
Oh,
nice. That's a good idea, huh?
they
Just
they've
remember
been
the
my
responsibility. You've been warned.
exactly. Only if it
Yeah, good
works for
idea.
you. Yeah.
For sure. I have a Facebook question here. Are there specific questions you can ask your young person to probe or assess their mood, other than the usual, how are you doing? So if you're sensing maybe depression or loneliness or anything from your child, how can you probe the conversation?
So I think, interestingly enough, going back to another person's question about their observations, you can always start with an observation that you're making without labeling, right? So you can say, "Hey, I've noticed that you're being more quiet today. How are you feeling?" Right? So versus "How are you doing?" Because sometimes when we say "How are you doing?" we're so automatically programmed to say "I'm good, I'm fine."
Mhm.
Right? What's wrong? Nothing. Right?
Mhm.
So if the since the parent is asking about, how do you kind of lead in, you can lead in with observations, right? Because that's open ended, so you allow the person to respond and maybe add more substance to your observation by saying, "Oh, I was just quiet because," right, and maybe they give you an explanation, or, "Oh yeah, I've really been feeling this way." So I think leading in with observation can be really helpful. And again, observation without labeling what it is. So not like, I've noticed that you're being more depressed, because maybe they're not depressed. Maybe it's something completely different, right? So almost like describing the behavior, right? Versus labeling the behavior is what I'm saying. So that can be helpful. Heather, any ideas on good lead-ins?
Sure. I going along with that, you know, challenging ourselves to ask better questions, right? Like get specific or genuinely curious about something you know that matters to them, you know, a sport that follows, a situation at school, anything they're interested in, you know, maybe get out of your comfort zone a little bit to ask about something or show your interest in something maybe you wouldn't usually be interested in, but depending on the age of the kid, they can tell that we're trying to connect with them. And if you're a little, if you're tending to get the I'm fine, everything's fine kind of answers, you know, shaking it up a little bit in a playful, curious way can help ease any tension or resistance there, I've found.
Mm-hmm.
Also getting into a routine. I know my family does this a lot, do where you kind of you have a time of day or a way of checking in. We call it like a high low or a rose thorn, where it's just an automatic part of our day where we tell the best part, our favorite part, and one of the hardest parts or the worst thing. And there's no, you know, problem solving unless the person wants it. It's just a way to listen and hear about what's going on, and it can be a way to start building more awareness of what's going on in their lives, and then, you know, we can share too, leading
What,
by example.
what about, I know many people have children that are not expressive, where you can just open the door a little and they just dive right into conversation. What can you say? And then maybe you already answered it specifically, other than how are you doing? With teenagers, it says they're the toughest to crack, though. So a teenager usually is not going to rattle it off, no matter how you uh, pose the question or suggest. What can you do? Teenagers.
You know, sometimes you can give examples that's not personal to your child, and that can be helpful, right? So sometimes it's easier to speak in like hypotheticals, right?
For example.
For example, so if the child has something to say but you're really curious, you can just start asking questions. So, you know, I remember, especially if you're really good with remembering the names of the friends of your children, right? If you're really good with remembering those names whenever they have or may have told you a friend's name, or if you met somebody, you know, so how are things going with you? And right, you call out the name of the friend, right? How are things going in class with this person or that person? If you want to know how things will be handled, you can use hypothetical situations. So, what do you think about this situation? Let me tell you this story, right? And then you get them to give you input, right? Or their ideas, how they're thinking about things. So, that too can still be very helpful. Sometimes you have a child, when things are directed at them or they feel like the spotlight is on them, they just kind of hide and they retreat inward. But sometimes using that hypothetical position or talking about or situation, talking about someone else, right? Not them, you can still get a feel of how your child is thinking about things, how they may handle situations as they come up. So that can still be helpful, and it can still allow you to have that time to connect and understand your child better.
Mhm. The person said, and I think you probably answered part of it. It says that based off of their behavior or observation, but then they said yes. So I think you probably answered while they were typing as well.
Okay.
It's been an hour, hasn't it? Look at that. We used up our 1 hour. Anything else we want to say, Heather, Dr. Jackson, to wind this up a little bit in terms of mental health check-in? I think we had a number of people check in. We were all around with our questions, so that was pretty good. I hope people benefited a little bit. A lot of it was, we ended up with children based, how to handle the kids, huh?
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you for the comment of it being a great session. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Um, I I I think that this time is really great. Sometimes, you know, this can be counted as self-care, right? So
Mhm.
I have questions, I have things that I'm really curious about. I want to know how to handle. Maybe I'm not yet linked with a therapist. but I just wanted to run this by somebody. And so I hope that, this setting has allowed people to do that, and have some questions answered and have some guidance on maybe where to go with their children or with themselves, or, with loved ones. I think that a lot of the questions about loss, I think it's so important that we understand that loss is not just a loss of a person, but loss is a loss of the student who was anticipating going to college, and that was taken away from them because of the pandemic that we're in, and now they're having to accept the reality that my freshman year of college I am at home, or my senior year when I was supposed to graduate didn't happen, and all these losses that they have experienced. It still leaves a person dealing with grief, from that loss. And so I hope that our answers have been helpful, and I hope that people were able to get uh, uh, better insight as to how to address some of the concerns that they had, that they brought into the session with the questions that were submitted.
I'd love for both of you to type your contact information in the chat. I'm getting a couple of messages asking that. So if you can type your contact, that would be great. I see someone who says, I always get that I'm being too bossy. So we have an ongoing list of more questions. We're going to continue the dialogue. Check on novilibrary.org to find out our next mental health check-in program, because this will be ongoing. Also, if you do have teens and they are experiencing stress, April 27th at 6:30 p.m., we are going to talk to teenagers as well as Dr. Jackson and some additional professionals on teen stress. So they will be live sharing their experiences, and often teens can relate to other teens. So maybe that'll be helpful. So spread the word if you have a teenager or if you know someone who does. April 27th, log on to novilibrary.org to register for the Zoom link. It will also take place Facebook Live as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. And thank you, Heather and Dr. Jackson, for being my special guest. And have a good night, everyone. Take care. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Heather and Dr. Jackson, stay on, please.